Look at all of these fireflies. Now in this video, we're going to be talking about a little bit more about classification of biodiversity. Specifically, we're going to be talking about domain and kingdom. Now, we have so many organisms on our planet, so many, and so it's very important that we learn how they are classified, how we group and organize them, right? That is what classification of biodiversity means. Classification means to organize or to group, and biodiversity means all living things, the diversity of life, how we can group this diversity of life into logical categories. So we know that what we have come up with is this method of classification, all the way from general being domain down to specific being species. Okay, how do we remember this order of classification? You can remember this phrase, this little sentence. Dear Kevin, please come over for good soup. Or what it says right here. It's down to you. Whatever you find easiest. Even if you don't like this, you can go find another one, I'm sure, on the internet. Okay? So the key thing is it just goes from general at the domain to specific at the species. Okay? So, but specifically in this video, we're only going to focus on domain and kingdom. Okay? The first broad categories. So all living things, right? Pretend this picture shows all the living things on Earth, okay? How can we classify all the living things on Earth? The first thing we need to consider is the domain, okay? All living things can be classified in one of three groups, one of three domains, okay? Either Eukarya, Eubacteria, or Archaea, okay? Either one, anything. You can name any organism right now, they will go under one of these three groups. So, under Eukarya, we will have any organism that is made up of eukaryotic cells, such as humans, plants, fungi, things like that, okay? All of these go under eukaryotic cells, okay? Because they go under the domain of eukarya because they're made up of eukaryotic cells. To go under to be classified under either Archaea or Eubacteria, you must have a prokaryotic cell, okay? And again, the differences between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells is the fact that eukaryotic cells have a lot of these organelles. Notice we have these DNA, mitochondria, all of these things, right? All these organelles that prokaryotic cells don't have, okay? Now, what's the difference between Eubacteria and Archaea, since they're both prokaryotic cells? The main difference is, I'll talk about more, because I have a table here that distinguishes all of these according to different traits, but the main difference between these two is that Archaea are organisms, prokaryotic organisms, that can survive extremely harsh environments, like temperatures of 100 degrees Celsius, or environments that are really salty, that humans or eukaryotic organisms couldn't survive in. So that's their main difference, okay? But let's cover some other ones, some key other differences. So this table is really useful for you. If you can remember the differences between Archaea, Eubacteria, and Eukarya according to these specific characteristics, then you've pretty much know everything you need to know for domain, okay? For the domain. So like I said already, the one difference is the nucleus. Eukaryotic cells or eukarya organisms have a nucleus, right? This is because they are also not prokaryotic. They are eukaryotic, right? So, and then the other two will not have a nucleus. They have DNA, right? But it's not in a nucleus. A nucleus is a compartment that holds DNA, and these don't have that compartment. Their DNA is just free floating. These two I'll talk about just now. I just want to get these simple ones out of the way. And again, the Archaea, so this one, can survive extreme environments, as I mentioned. We'll get into more detail there later. Whereas Eubacteria cannot, and eukaryotic organisms mostly cannot. But there are some examples in which they can. So just write sometimes. Now, Archaea and Eubacteria are prokaryotes, right? We can see that with these cells. And then Eukarya are not, because they are eukaryotic. And then lastly, as I already mentioned, the Archaea and Eubacteria don't have organelles, right? They don't have organelles. All we see is some DNA and that's it. No organelles like eukaryotic cells do. Now these last two categories, okay? DNA with histones and cells with peptidoglycan. So DNA with histones, what does that mean? So we know that all of these have DNA, right? Now eukaryotic cells have histones. Let me show you. Eukaryotic cells have histones. Eubacteria do not have histones, and Archaea have histones. So both Archaea and Eubacteria have histones associated with their DNA, whereas Eubacteria do not. Let me show you what I mean. So histones are basically this. So you notice we have DNA, right? DNA can be folded up, right? And they are folded up around these things called histones, okay? It's like a little thing that helps wrap it up. So you can see it wraps around these histones. And these histones can wrap around each other, and eventually they wrap around more and more and more until we have chromosomes, right? So basically this histones, this process, is only present in eukaryotic cells and archaea, not in eubacteria, okay? So that's one key difference you need to know. Now last one is this one, cells with peptidoglycan. Okay, so peptidoglycan is a component that can be found in the wall, the cell wall of eubacteria. Okay, it cannot be found in archaea or eukarya. They're only found here, and they help stabilize the membrane of eubacteria. Eukarya have other things that help stabilize the membrane, and same with archaea. So this is super useful because eubacteria includes all organisms that are bacteria. So for example, E. coli or streptococcus or staphylococcus, pneumonia, all of these bacteria that can infect us and make us sick, right? So they all have this different structure called peptidoglycan in their membrane. And this is really useful because in medicine, we can give a type of antibiotic that can target and destroy this peptidoglycan, because by doing so, the bacteria will die, because this peptidoglycan was useful in maintaining the cell structure of the eubacteria. And since we don't have it, by giving this antibiotic, we don't destroy our own cells, okay, because our own cells don't have that structure. So that's one useful thing to know about peptidoglycan. It's something that is targeted by medicine when we get infected by eubacteria to make sure we kill it off, okay? So these are the 1, 2, 3, okay, all the way 6 differences or 6 things we need to know about the 3 domains, okay? Now, that's it for what we need to know about domain, okay, domain. So we have 3 domains. These domains can be further organized into kingdoms. So let me show you what I mean. So here we have, by the way, this is the Chamber of Secrets. We're going to reveal some things here, okay, under this box. So now we're getting a bit more specific. So all the 3 categories of domain, okay, I'm putting it here in the line with domain. They can be organized into some kingdoms. Let me show you what I mean. So eukarya, so we know eukarya is all organisms with eukaryotic cells. That includes plants, animals, fungi, and protista. You probably have trouble with these 2, fungi and protista, because we all know what plants and animals are, and they have eukaryotic cells, right? So all eukaryotic organisms can be divided into 4 categories. All eubacteria is still eubacteria. So they have a kingdom that's called the same as the domain because there's only one kind of eubacteria, okay? Like one kind of kingdom. And their archaea can be divided into archaebacteria. Archaebacteria consist of 3, okay? They can either be the kingdom Methanogens, or the kingdom Halophiles, or the kingdom Thermoacidophiles, okay? Any of these 3. Now, let's get a bit more detailed. We'll focus a bit on what's going on here first. So we know what plants and animals are, so I'm not going to go into more details there. Fungi is basically a eukaryotic organism that basically grows. An example would be mold. So when you look into your corner of your room and it's very humid there, sometimes fungi will grow, okay? Fungi. It's a little organism it's also mushrooms are fungi, okay? So mushrooms is an example of fungi. It's an organism that is made up of eukaryotic cells we call fungi. Now, there's not much you need to know about this. You just need to know fungi are basically mushrooms or mold, okay? Now, protista, this is the one probably you don't know much about. So protista is another type of eukaryotic organism. It is single-celled. So we know we're made up of many, many, many cells. Fungi, animal, plants, made up of many cells. Okay, we're multicellular. Protista is a single eukaryotic cell. And what do we need to know about it? We need to know that in the past, scientists thought it was junk. They thought it was useless. So everything that was not a plant, an animal, or a fungi, they would put in this category called protista. Okay? because it didn't make sense. It didn't make up our bodies. It didn't make up anything that made sense. So they thought it was junk, okay? It didn't make up our tissues of our body. So they put in this category. Now, what do we know about it now? Examples of Protista include this. Let me show you. Include Paramecium, that's an example, Euglena, and amoeba. Amoeba is something that can infect humans and make us sick, okay? So Protista can include organisms that can make us sick and give us disease. But also it includes some organisms, you can see they're single-celled, they're one cell big. You can see they're also organisms that can do photosynthesis. So an example of a Protista would be Euglena. This organism is responsible for making half the oxygen on Earth. So they're very important. Protista are super important for this reason. And then lastly, Paramecium, okay? That's another example you should be aware of. But know that they are not really junk, okay? All of these organisms are put into this category, but they are really important to know about. Amoeba because they cause a disease. Euglena because they are responsible for creating half the oxygen on our Earth, okay? So don't neglect this category. They are important. And they're huge. It's a huge category. There are so many organisms in this category. Now, Eubacteria is simple. That's basically all bacteria. E. coli, as I already mentioned, Clostridium, Staphylococcus. You don't need to know this name. Just know all the bacteria that we talk about that can infect us or be useful to us, because we have a lot of bacteria. For example, in our digestive system, we have over 1 kilogram of bacteria that help us survive and are actually useful to us. So they're not necessarily just bad. Now next, we have the Archaea. We know that what distinguishes this one from Eubacteria, because they're both prokaryotic cells, is that Archaea can survive in very harsh conditions, okay? So, for example, they can be Methanogens, but I'll come to this one afterwards. Start off the simple one. They can be thermoacidophiles. These are organisms that can survive in extremely hot temperatures, up to 100 degrees Celsius, okay? And then we have halophiles. Halo means salt. So these are, again, philic means to like, right? So these bacteria, thermo means temperature and philic means to like. So they love bacteria. Halo means salt and philic means to like. So these bacteria love salty environments, okay? Where, such as the Dead Sea and things like that, where there's a lot of, or salt mines, where there's a really high concentration of salt, where Eubacteria or Eukarya may not be able to survive. Okay, and then last one is Methanogens. These are organisms that are found in the gut of cows. So they do a job. So they live in the gut of the cows and they help break down. They live in your stomach in your gut, because that's an environment that is very suitable for them, where they can digest your food, and in the process of respiration, so survival, they will make methane. Okay. That's why cows poop a lot of methane, because these bacteria make a lot of methane, and the only way it can exit the body is through farting, okay? So that's Methanogens. Any other organism would struggle to survive in that kind of environment. So this is the general classification of kingdoms. So we know that everything on our Earth is divided into 3 domains, and these 3 domains can be divided a bit further into kingdoms, okay? Eukarya, these 4 kingdoms, Eubacteria, this kingdom, and Archaea, these couple of kingdoms. And now in the next video, we're going to be focusing on even further dividing this. So we can divide all of these even further, okay? But we're not going to, that's too much to do. So for the IB, we're only going to focus on the phylum of plants and animals. So we're going to divide plants into a bunch of phylums and animals into a bunch of phylums, okay? The rest we don't care about for IB, okay? Obviously there's stuff related there, but for the IB we don't focus on that.